President Biden has made it legal for Ukrainian immigrants to get SSI checks. So if you are a Ukrainian refugee in America, you can apply for SSI. Help me understand that, because we have the highest black homelessness population since the 1960s. You got black people living on the street because they can't find a job and can't get any subsidy. But you're going to bring immigrants, didn't build this country, don't pay taxes, don't have a job, never paid into Social Security, but they're going to get Social Security benefits. You're taking from black people and giving to immigrants. If that is not the greatest example of white privilege in this decade, I don't know what is. That's not a civilization. To neglect those who built the country and give their resources to white people from another land is one of the greatest examples of disproportionality, bias, racism, and discrimination I've ever seen. And at the same time, you're sending the Haitians back. Haitians got to get on a boat and go home, but the Ukrainians can come get free housing, free medical, free insurance, and an SSI check.
But don't scare Negroes today with no badge or no white skin or no white sheet or no white anything else. The police the same way. They put their club upside your head and then turn around and accuse you of attacking them. Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side other than what the white man chooses to give him? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this, and it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves. They attack the victim, and then the criminal who attacked the victim accuses the victim of attacking him. Yes, sir. This is American justice. Yes, sir. That's right. This is American democracy. Yes, and those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Right. Now,
You studied your history, and you did not take over this country by singing "We Shall Overcome." You did not gain control of the world like you have it now by dealing fairly with a man and keeping your word. You're treaty breakers, you're liars, you're thieves, you rape entire continents and races of people. Then you wonder why these very people don't have any confidence or trust in you. Your religion means nothing. Your law is a farce, and we see it every day. You demonstrated it in Alabama, and I can say you because you're part of the whole system. You profit from it. In fact, you make your living from it. You couldn't walk around and talk to people, stand up in your pulpit on Sunday and preach nice little songs and say, now we're going to give thanks to the Lord for he is good and old Jesus be among us. As far as we're concerned, your Jesus is contaminated, just like everything else you tried to force upon us is contaminated. Well, so you can have him. And here's what I'll say. I wish you would follow Jesus like we followed him. Because if you did that, then we'd be in charge tomorrow.
Salaam Alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
Wa salatu wa salam wa rasulullah wa ba'd. In the name of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon his last and final messenger. Family, friends, foes, haters, and hate, welcome back to the Feachaz. I greet you all in peace and love with no hatred in my heart. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So before we begin, please like, please subscribe, and please share. As you know, we got a lot of haters up in here. And today's live is just, again, showing that we are being vindicated here in the Black Muslim grassroots. And what we say, every single time we say something, we have the receipts and the facts to back it up. So at first I want to give a salams to Brother Bilal. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This brother, he sent me a file that was written in 2017. And this file was put out by the FBI. So I'm going to share it with you. And the FBI, I want y'all to understand something about the FBI. Okay, the FBI, known as the Federal Bureau of Investigations, they don't fight criminals. They create them, just like the CIA. Okay, their strategy is quite simple. They hire the most violent, extreme elements of society to join Black organizations and essentially ensnare members in these organizations with criminal activity. That has been their go-to move since Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. And they have been doing this for the better part of over 100 years, okay? Well over 100 years. All right, FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigations. As you can see here, this is an FBI document, and it's titled Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers. Yet there is no history at all of any Black organization explicitly targeting law enforcement officers. There's a lot of history of white supremacist organizations doing that. As a matter of fact, if you look at your mass shootings, there has been in the United States, I believe up until this day, 88 mass shootings since the beginning of the year in 2023. 88. So you're talking well over one mass shooting per day. There is no history of any Black organization or underground group whose strategy is to cause mass shooting. However, this tactic is not a new tactic. It is a very old tactic since the inception of the FBI, and all they have done is attach new names to this old tactic. So you see here, it says, the FBI assesses it is very likely that Black identity extremists, this is a new name they just made up, they made it up, 2017 under the Trump administration, okay, perceptions of police brutality against African Americans, perceptions, mind you, spurred an increase in premeditated retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement will likely serve as a justification for such violence. When you're saying will likely serve as a justification, that means it hasn't happened. Let us be very clear. So what this is a pretense, again, to infiltrate Black organizations again. So there was a podcast a couple of weeks ago, not very long ago, on a channel called The Alphabet Boys, in which it was more of a investigative journalism podcast, where they put out the goods of the FBI infiltrating Black Lives Matter. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do a live reaction to Democracy Now! Breaking down the FBI and their criminal activity within the Black Lives Matter organization. You got to remember, if any Black organization ever comes into fruition, it will be infiltrated. So the cure for this infiltration is to stay on code. That is the cure. It is not enough that us as Black folk to be united. That's not enough. Because you're going to be united upon what exactly? But rather, in my humble opinion, the concepts and the instructions that are laid out in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the way that the Sahaba understood it, is the best cure for infiltration, because they had infiltrators at their time, the Munafiqun. And Allah laid out their descriptions, and the Prophet ﷺ, he laid out the descriptions in the Sunnah. He described them. So if Allah is describing who the Munafiqun or these infiltrators are in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's describing who these infiltrators are, these Munafiqun in the Sunnah, and they're giving you a very clear-cut blueprint in how to discover these nefarious elements inside Islam itself. Do you not think that this is very important information that the Muslims should take heed to? Do you not believe that? From the descriptions of the infiltrators, every single time they speak, they lie. When they make a promise, they can't keep it. When they're given a covenant, they always break it. And they always argue in a rude, condescending manner. Do you not think this is good information? For the Muslims, they can't, these infiltrators, the most difficult prayers for them are the Fajr prayer and the Isha prayer. Do you not think this is good information? This is why I say that this Islam is the cure. It is. And the Prophet ﷺ, he himself said, this is what he said. He said that he wished that one day that he can call the adhan, he would make the call to prayer, and he would allow somebody else to lead the salat so that he can go to the houses of those people, those infiltrators who did not wake up to pray, and burn them down. And the only reason why he didn't do so is because he was concerned about the women and the children. To me, that's important information. To me. And I take that information to heart because that information is incredibly useful. Because it is a blueprint to finding the nefarious elements within Islam. And this is why I say this Quran, this Sunnah, and this understanding of the Sahaba is the cure for these infiltrators. So it is upon us as Black Muslims to make this a lifestyle and not a hobby. Because once we start making dawah to these people, they will learn to love Islam. They will. But I digress, okay? I digress. So do now is we are going to react to this video from Democracy Now! And see what they got to say about this wicked criminal organization called the FBI and how they infiltrated Black Lives Matter. Let's have a look. Let's have a look here. 1 second, y'all. Right. Let me know how y'all hearing it. If the sound is good.
This is Democracy Now, democracynow.org, the Warren Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with one. Documents how the FBI paid an informant at least $20,000. This is the trailer to Alphabet Boys.
All right, y'all. Give me a minute, right? Let's see here. Give me a minute, y'all. Sorry for the bad connection. All right, let's go. Let's rewind this. Okay, look at here. Can y'all hear me? Let me just turn up the volume. All right, let's try this again, okay? Now I sped up the speed so that we can get to the nitty-gritty with this whatchamacallit, with this live here. All right, so let me just there we go. All right, here we go.
This is Democracy Now, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Evidence has emerged that the FBI played a direct role in infiltrating racial documents how the
Maybe I have to put it to normal speed. 1 second. Because I can see it's like cutting out. 1 second.
After the police killing of George Floyd in 2020. A new podcast out today called Alphabet Boys. FBI paid at least $20,000 to infiltrate and spy on activist groups in Denver, Colorado.
Did y'all hear that? The FBI paid an informant $20,000 to infiltrate and spy on Black Lives Matter protesters. When you see this infiltrator, you're going to be like, what the heck is the FBI doing with our taxpayer money? They don't fight criminals, they make them. They produce them.
Documents how the FBI paid an informant at least $20,000 to infiltrate and spy on activist groups in Denver, Colorado. The informant also encouraged activists to purchase guns and commit violence.
Is that new? Is that new? That the FBI will infiltrate organizations, particularly Black ones, and encourage its members to violence. Who remembers what they did to Malcolm X? What they did to Martin Luther King? They encouraged Martin Luther King to commit suicide, did they not? Right now, Malcolm X's daughter is suing those race soldiers from the FBI and the CIA and the New York Police Department for their involvement in her father's murder. And we put out almost 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember when your so-called Dawa elites was saying that the Nation of Islam assassinated Malcolm X because he changed his mind about Islam and stuff. Weren't we the ones that put out, look at here, Bones and Biscuits, okay? Why didn't you mention the FBI involvement in Malcolm X's assassination? We don't play that anymore. So much so that even Malcolm X's daughter is suing the race soldiers, and she's bypassed the Nation of Islam, correct? Why? Because the FBI and the CIA are criminal organizations. And Georgia police departments, they were created in order to control the movement of Black people. That's why they were created to begin with. Anyways, let's keep watching now.
This is the trailer to Alphabet Boys.
Millions protest racial justice across the country. With some of these protests turning violent, like ridiculous. Just stop. Know what?
It is August 20, 2020 at approximately 4 p.m.
I'm a journalist covering federal holidays.
The FBI is going to grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
This is Alphabet Boys, a new series Eastern Sound and iHeart podcast. Each season, we'll take you deep inside an undercover investigation. In season 1, we're headed to Denver.
UC 7775 in Denver, Colorado. Today is August 5th.
FBI agents following the murder of George Floyd. A mysterious man rolls into town. He's wearing military fatigues, and he has a cigar dangling from his lips. The car he drives is unmistakable, a silver hearse.
He was very convincing, but he did explain, He was before this BLM movement, and inside his heart was like a lot of guns.
Was this the guy the movement needed to take things to the next level?
At the end of the day, you come to me, I got something for you. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Or did he have a secret agenda?
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, the meeting spot, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
He's a bad guy, and bad guys attract bad guys. And I feel like he's going to keep doing this forever.
They want to put up that local, state, and federal law enforcement cause violence here.
The trailer to the new podcast, Alphabet Boys, out today on their platform. The podcast centers on an FBI informant named Mickey Windecker. Paul will be joining us talking about Mickey Windecker.
I didn't know much about him, but he drove a hearse. And inside his hearse was like a lot of guns, you know, like AR-15s and all other kind of. I never held one of those before in my life, and I held it. I was like, oh, shit. I'm probably I never held anything like that. Yeah, it was just this badass dude, you know, talking about he worked in the foreign military. He was for the Black Lives Matter movement, and you know.
Hope y'all heard that. This FBI informant was doing what in the Black Lives Matter protest? He was number one, driving a hearse, and number two, driving a hearse full of guns. I want y'all to understand something. The Jewish community in New York City, and probably pretty much anywhere in North America, if I'm being real. Do you know, at least in New York City, that police don't go into their neighborhoods? Do you know that? Who polices the Jewish community in New York? Do y'all know? Somebody put it in the chat, please. Who polices the Jewish community in New York? Somebody please put it in the chat. Who does it? Thank you. Urban Muslim was C.L. Edwards. They police themselves. And yes, they have their own, medical system. You see, they own their banks. They own their schools. They police themselves. And they do it without weapons. They do it without weapons. When's the last time you ever heard of a crime wave in any Jewish community? Have you ever heard of that? Malcolm X, he had a very famous saying with regards to the police. He said that during the time when Lyndon Johnson, at that time, was it Lyndon Johnson? I can't remember. It was Lyndon Johnson or whatchamacallit, JFK. I can't remember which one it was. But they were increasing the police presence in the Black community. And they were saying, he said that, how can you have more police and more crime? It shows that the cops are in cahoots with the criminals. He said that way back then. Is that not the case in our time? Is that not the case in our time? the amount of spooks and spies that the U.S. government has paid to disrupt and dismantle any type of grassroots organization is absolutely ridiculous. And they're doing it from both sides on top of that, which is why I said Islam is actually the solution, because we have a method and a system to weed out infiltrators. Let's keep watching, y'all.
Americans protesting across the country. Activist Zeb Hall invites a guy he's met at one of the demonstrations to his apartment in Denver to talk about plans for the future.
The way I look at it is like, it has to happen. It's like you said. I mean, how extreme do you expect it? Would you want it to go?
An excerpt from the podcast Alphabet Boys. The FBI informant, Mickey Windecker, played a key role in organizing the protests in Denver. He would also go on to give the activist Zebediah Hall $1,500 to buy a gun for him, which led to Zeb Hall being arrested for transferring a firearm to a felon.
Entrapment. Didn't we say they don't catch criminals, they produce them? That's entrapment. Let's keep watching, you.
Some of the FBI's actions have been compared to the agency's covert COINTELPRO program, that's counterintelligence program, which targeted civil rights groups and other activist movements in the 1960s and 70s. In a moment.
It's an extension of COINTELPRO. They never stopped that. They expanded it. They gave it different names. They called it the Patriot Act. Y'all remember that? The Patriot Act? Well, what do we say all the time about the Muslim struggle here? The black struggle is the Muslim struggle. If you want to see what they're going to do to Muslims, you have to look no further than what they already done to the black community. That's it. The same tactics. They just give these devilish tactics different names. Whether you call it redlining, whether you call it apartheid, whether you call it gentrification, it's three different names for the same system. Make sure you keep your colored folk stuck in one area, financially disrupt any activities they have in that area, and police the borders around that area, and then blame them for their own poverty. That's all it is. It's all the same tactics. The COINTELPRO, Patriot Act, and now this thing, whatchamacallit? All these tactics, same. It's the same. How to legalize disruption and infiltration and criminal activity, create the criminal activity in order to dismantle the groups. Let's keep going, y'all.
From Denver. We'll also be joined by former FBI agent Mike German, who now works at the Brennan Center. But first, let's turn to Trevor Aronson, who created the Alphabet Boys podcast. He's an award-winning investigative journalist, contributing writer for The Intercept. He's author of the book, The Terror Factory, Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism. I mean, this is an astounding podcast series, Trevor. You've got the reports of, for example, the black activist Zeb speaking to this man, Mickey Windecker, who would travel around in a silver hearse story for us.
The records, but what I can say is that what's significant about this show is that it's the first behind-the-scenes look at how this movement during the summer, which is how did the FBI respond?
You know, when the Black Lives Matter protest started back in 2020, And your bones and biscuit Muslims like Nasser al-Hambali started calling the protesters sympathizers with the LGBTs and whatnot, even though it's a grassroots protest. It had nothing to do with no LGBT. And it was an international protest. And his only concern wasn't for the police brutality. And he didn't say anything about the 9 minutes of that cops, snuffing out the life of George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. He didn't say anything about that. His only concern was the Muslims chanting when the kuffar chant and swaying when the kuffar sway. What, ain't that right? Ain't that what he was concerned about? And we put out way back then that these organizations have a history of infiltrating Black organizations, just like they have a history of infiltrating Muslim organizations. Didn't we put it out way back then? Did we not say that, yes or no? All the way back in 2020. And now the goods is coming out on this Federal Bureau of Iblis, as Muwahid calls it. Now the goods are coming out. Negro Dominance strikes again. Looking into the future, okay, and stating the obvious. And now here come this FBI agent putting out the goods on this infiltration. Let's keep watching, y'all.
Extremists or anti-government extremists. And what's significant about this is that the FBI in Denver, according to internal FBI report, with a weapon to infiltrate these groups while being paid thousands for recordings, hired a convicted felon with a sexual weapon to infiltrate these groups. Internal FBI reports and undercover recordings, hired a convicted felon with a history of sexual assault and menacing with a weapon to infiltrate these groups while being paid undercover recordings, hired a convicted felon with a history of sexual assault and menacing with a weapon to infiltrate these groups.
Did y'all hear who they hired? The individual that they hired? What is new about this? Did not the FBI hire criminals to infiltrate the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther Party in the 60s? Didn't they do that? These people are not your friends. They are the enemy. They have always been the enemy. And you should always look at them as a hostile organization against Black people. And know that as long as you're trying to organize as a Black organization, they're coming, especially if you got some weight and some pull. Devilish people.
While being paid thousands of dollars. And the shades of COINTELPRO that are part of this rise from the fact that Mickey Windecker, the informant, ended up becoming a leader in the protest movement, just as we saw informants in the 1960s and 1970s during COINTELPRO become leaders in those movements, and then accuse other leaders, or the real leaders of these groups, of being informants. It's a practice called snitch jacketing that was...
Did not we put out snitch jacketing, this tactic, way back into 2022, as 2020 as well? Did not we expose the people to this tactic? And did we not say that some of your YouTubian da'i elites, we won't mention their names, they practice this? Did we not say that? And there's a huge asterisk beside the names of these so-called YouTubians who use this old tactic of snitch jacketing against their opponents. Didn't we say that? Did we not put out Dr. Zach Kondo and his breakdown of the FBI involvement in the assassination of Malcolm X and how they influenced the Nation of Islam to not only organize themselves, the small group, and they had their own people. The FBI had their own people in the death squad against Malcolm X, but they also used this tactic of snitch jacketing in the nation as well as the Black Panther Party. Didn't we put that out there? Y'all must be tripping. And now it is 2023, and the same tactics that this Federal Bureau of Iblis has been practicing way back in the 60s, and they're doing the same thing now. So let me ask y'all something. If you didn't learn from the tactics of your enemy for an entire, how many, almost 80 something years, if you didn't learn from the tactics of your enemy for that entire time, is that a you problem or a them problem? We put those tactics out for you to see and for you to know what it is. And we said that this person and that person, they are practicing snitch jacketing. Did we not say that? Y'all must be tripping. You think we out here just talking for the sake of talking out here. We ain't talking for the sake of talking. Y'all must be tripping. Let's keep watching, y'all.
Used the devastating effects against Black political groups in the 1960s. And that's exactly what happened in Denver. Mickey became a leader of the racial justice movement there, accused real leaders of being informants when they were not. And then once he was in a position of leadership, attempted to entrap local activists in crimes, in some cases violent crimes. In fact, Mickey and the FBI went so far as to try to stitch together a supposed plot to assassinate Colorado's Attorney General, Phil Weiser, which ultimately went nowhere, but shows you the scale that the FBI had in trying to manufacture a plot that activists could get behind that would then reveal these activists as being violent. And I think it's important to understand the context in which this happened. In 2020,
Did y'all hear that? I don't think y'all heard that. Let's watch this again, okay? Y'all didn't catch that. Watch now.
About his Attorney General, Phil Weiser, which ultimately went nowhere, but shows you went so far as to try to stitch together a supposed plot to assassinate Colorado's Attorney General, Phil Weiser, which ultimately...
Who's trying to stitch together an assassination plot? Somebody put in the chat who's trying to stitch together an assassination plot. Old tactics of the enemy. Doing the same thing since the 60s. And y'all still ain't learned? Y'all still ain't learned. Is that an us problem or a them problem if you haven't learned from your enemy? These shayateen, these devils, these wicked people, this criminal organization. If you haven't learned, these people are establishing an assassination plot. They assassinated Martin Luther King. They assassinated Malcolm X. They assassinated Patrice Lumumba, the CIA did. How many leaders did they assassinate? Attempted to assassinate Louis Farrakhan. Assassinated Khalid Muhammad, Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And now they're up to their old ancient tricks And y'all out here fighting each other? Y'all out here fighting each other. You haven't received enough licks yet. That's the problem. Y'all haven't had enough pain yet. That's the issue. Ancient tricks that they admit to, and you're still going for the okie doke. Let's keep watching, y'all.
Went nowhere, but shows you the scale that the FBI had in trying to manufacture a plot that activists could get behind that would then reveal these activists as being violent. And I think it's important to understand the context in which this happened. In 2020, the Trump administration at the time was really beating the drum on this idea that Antifa and Black Lives Matter activists were potentially violent. This was a narrative that was being reinforced, and you're seeing in these undercover recordings is the FBI essentially trying to make that possible and happen. Ultimately, that does not happen. Obviously, there was no assassination plot or attempt against Phil Weiser, the college.
And COINTELPRO in the 60s.
That happened.
Well, Trevor, as you mentioned, this was a tactic used often in law enforcement.
Ain't that what we just said? Ain't that what we just said? Listen, y'all.
Tactic used often during COINTELPRO in the 60s and the 70s, but it's become standard practice for the FBI.
Did we not just say that this is standard practice for when we say this, they're old tactics? We just said that, correct? Just keep watching.
Extreme action among the protesters during the period after the 9/11 attacks. There were undercover FBI agents who tried to infiltrate Muslim groups around the country and trying to get them to participate.
What do we keep telling y'all in this channel? What did he just say? Y'all better be sharing this.
Attacks. There were undercover FBI agents who tried to infiltrate Muslim groups around the country.
What did he just say? So when you find your white supremacist Muslims out here banging for white supremacy, ordering the Muslims to participate in this left-right paradigm, and we call them what they are. We call them traitors. We call them infiltrators. We call them treacherous, liars, racists. And you got the nerve to ask us, why are we jumping to conclusions when we are not? Too much evidence. And now this non-Muslim is out here telling you the FBI is using the same tactics that they used against black people, against the Muslims. When we start looking at you funny and we start distancing ourselves from you, it ain't personal. We out here protecting ourselves from you. This non-Muslim is, look at here. Look, y'all. Look.
Period after the 9/11 attacks, there were undercover FBI agents who tried to infiltrate Muslim groups around the country and trying to.
You can't make this crap up. How long have we been telling y'all this?
Get them to participate in violent acts. So this has been a regular feature of the FBI. Have you been able to see whether they?
How many people has the FBI trying to entrap from the Muslims? That's in the same manner that they entrap black people with criminality, trying to commit violent acts. Y'all just got here, man. Some of y'all from the Eastern countries who just got here, so happy to see Zaddy and stuff, happy about democracy. Y'all need to sit down. Y'all need to sit down and be quiet. Y'all need to listen when grown black folks is talking to you. The enemy that you don't know and can't wait to serve, to even sleep with, marry, you name it. Do you know that even some of your favorite da'is, and I mean high-level da'is, ended up marrying agents of the intelligence industry and didn't know that they married the enemy? Do you know that? Don't play with me. You don't know this enemy, okay? So eager and happy because your enemy gave you the opportunity to live on stolen land so you can get the opportunity to buy your home on stolen land and buy your vehicles from stolen resources in Africa. And your cell phones are the same thing, stolen resources. Y'all play too much. Y'all getting some true burgers today. I hope y'all are sharing this, okay?
We're doing this to the same extent among the right-wing groups that were actually
was that the FBI used undercover agents or informants to, in the case of counterterrorism investigations, find someone who might be interested in violence and make everything possible, providing the means, the opportunity, and in most cases, the bomb or the weapon that ultimately would be used, then arrest that person and announce to the public a terrorism plot foiled. And so what's significant.
Anything else? Any questions? Any questions? Don't play with me today.
Here is that we're seeing a lot of the powers and tactics used against would-be or supposed terrorists in the post-9/11 era being applied against political activists in Denver in the summer of 2020. And the reason that is significant is that the internal FBI records show in the case in Denver that the FBI launched its investigation based on nothing more than First Amendment protected activities, which were essentially things that Zebediah Hall and other activists had said, which in some cases were quite incendiary, but ultimately were First Amendment protected activities. And yet they launched this investigation based solely on that without any reason to believe that any of these activists were moving toward a plot of violence or anything of the like. And as for the question of whether this happens on the right, it does. You know, obviously there have been other plots that have targeted right-wing activists. The most well-known right now is the plot that targeted a group of men in Michigan in a supposed plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And so I think what's important about this story now is that we are entering this phase when Jim Jordan and the Congress are about to launch this committee that is specifically looking to establish this narrative that the FBI is solely focused on this type of tactic against right-wing groups and right-wing political activists, when that isn't true. What ultimately is true is that the FBI has an enormous amount of power that deserves a lot more oversight than it currently receives. And all sorts of groups from left to right are subjected to this kind of activity by the FBI. And so this narrative that the right wing is attempting to establish that the FBI is prejudiced against right-wing groups and we're only seeing this activity among right-wing groups, there is evidence of that. And no doubt Jim Jordan will find it. But the truth is that this is far more extensive. It involves many groups. And in most cases, I would argue, if you look at the history of prosecutions in the post-9/11 era, these types of tactics are used far more against left-wing activists and left-wing political groups than they are against right-wing groups.
Even though the intelligence committees have found that it is domestic terrorism, far right wing, that is the greatest threat to the United States right now. And you're talking about the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government chaired by Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio that's meeting on Thursday. But let's turn to a video capturing when FBI informant Mickey Windecker met with his FBI handlers. By the way, he's denying he's an FBI informant. Met with his FBI handlers before he met with the Denver activist Zeb Hall.
It is August 28th, 2020 at approximately 4:02 p.m. Special Agent Scott Dahlstrom with Special Agent Byron Mitchell, CHS, for meet with Zebediah Hall. Thank you. You can do this stuff in my front pocket, right? Yeah. Okay. Take how much slender there?
Video look good? Yep. Yeah, look handsome. Not as handsome as that kid.
So that's Mickey Windecker talking to his handlers, going out to meet the guest we're joined by right now, Zebediah Hall, or Zeb Hall, a Denver activist targeted by the FBI, featured in the Alphabet Boys podcast, joining us from Denver. I mean, Zeb, this is such an amazing story, because you'd think if the FBI wanted to infiltrate a group like a Black Lives Matter group, they wouldn't have someone who just appears so different in every way. This white guy who is blatantly driving the silver hearse filled with automatic weapons. I mean, it is amazing. So talk about how you met up with him, your involvement in BLM, Black Lives Matter, and why you came to believe that he was a fellow traveler, if you will.
I first met, well, thanks for having me. Earlier protest, either it had been early July or late June. He was around a lot of folks, taking information, phone numbers.
Well, I want y'all to see the tactics of these people, how they entrap people. They get the criminal and they encourage the criminal to encourage criminality in order to shut down organizations. They're not trying to catch criminals. They're trying to make criminals. Watch, y'all.
Whatnot. It was quite odd. We were all confused. We didn't know what to expect. And it was very terrifying down the line when we found out more about him. It's a very dangerous history this gentleman had. And I think it's very terrifying, especially the fact that, it was sent to our BLM movement in the hopes of tarnishing it.
And Zeb Hall, what led you to begin to think that he might not be on the up and up? And what were some of the examples of ways he tried to get people to do things they normally would not do?
It's towards the, I would probably say, towards, there was a march on the headquarters of the police department, and, people were just starting to get, more, how would I say, rowdy than usual. And, he's yelling at people, making orders and whatnot. And sometime down the line, it was really evident when the Colorado Springs Antifa released an article explaining more about this gentleman. It was very heinous and scary. So until that article came out, you had no suspicion that he might be an agent provocateur or undercover informant? It was very confusing. It was so much going on that summer. We didn't know what to expect, but we never would have thought that the FBI would have sent a gentleman like that to our movement. Everything's really confusing. It's so hard to put things together looking back now. But it's, I would say at the end of the day that, I think most of the things that happened, either be violent or confusion, wouldn't have happened without the FBI and their informant, Michael Windecker.
Let's go to hear the informant, Mickey Windecker, in a recording he made after he was accused of being an informant. He spoke in front of a flag for the Kurdistan Workers' Party and an AR-15 style assault rifle. That was his background.
So there's a group or an individual that's claiming that they are Antifa Colorado Springs. And in fact, that I believe they are actually not Antifa Colorado Springs, because I believe they're actually a cop. This individual has posted stuff discrediting other individuals that are fighting against the fascists in Denver, Colorado, such as Cutting the Plastic and other communist groups and other individuals. I, for one, am not amused or pleased about the that's going on.
So that's Mickey Windecker accusing Antifa of being the informants. Zeb Hall, talk about how you...
Snitch jacketing. And here's the funny thing. Black folks, they are so open. And black folks, they don't just hate people for the sake of hating them. That's not, I've never seen a black person just hating somebody just for the sake of hating them. They don't just hate white people because they're white. They don't just hate Asians because they're Asians. They don't hate brown people. That's not something that black folks do. Okay? But black folks will be hated because they are black. Specifically because they are black. By all and every other group. And black folks, they're so open that they let somebody like this through the ranks of the BLM organization, and all they can say is that it was confusing. That's it. Can you imagine? He don't look suspicious to you? Which one of y'all would think that someone looking like that will be a part of BLM? Is trying to help. But we do that. Black people, we do that. Up until this very day, you go throughout the Salafi community, anywhere in North America, and the majority of these so-called Salafi masjids are run by foreigners. The majority. This is what we do. We always allow foreigners to run our stuff. And again, the question has to be asked. Is that an us problem or a them problem? Because if you see your enemy using the same tactics, and even now, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're not trying to be smart about it. They didn't just go and get, somebody that look like us, that may be friendly to us. No, they went and found somebody who actually didn't like us to begin with, and gave them $20,000 and said, "Here, go and infiltrate Black Lives Matter." Do you see why the information about the Munafiqun and the Quran and the Sunnah is important? You see now? Can you imagine someone like that? Anyways, let's keep watching, y'all.
You were entrapped then, how he gave you money to buy a gun for him, and what happened next.
Oh, yeah, I'll start off saying, I was scared, but, I got to own the fact that I purchased the firearm. It was just quite odd, and, then the way in which, he explained it to me, I just didn't understand. I never purchased a gun before. And I get this gun for this gentleman, and, shortly after, the information comes out about his criminal history and who he is. And, I'm terrified at this point. And come around January, an article comes out, with Mr. Shelby, who will be mentioned later on. And at that point, I was absolutely terrified. It's, I was just afraid. I own what I did. And I never thought I'd be in a situation like this, but, here we are. It was just.
Did y'all hear that? This Negro never purchased a gun in his life. Never. No history of criminality. But because the enemy said, go purchase this gun, that's how the FBI got him. Y'all hear that? Gullible. But this is a disease that Black people have in general. We are susceptible to this type of stuff. You have a whole group of Black folks that believe that they are the ancient Egyptians, another group that believe that they are the indigenous Indians, another group that believe that they are the original Jews, and another group that believe that they are, the Anunnaki. Y'all believe anything, man. Y'all believe anything. And as long as you guys are willing to believe anything from anyone, you'll always find yourselves in these situations. Husnul dhan, giving your brother the benefit of the doubt, is not a ticket to be naive and gullible. Husnul dhan is like, your brother said he's going to meet you at 6 o'clock. He come at 6:30. You said he was stuck in traffic. Okay, that's husnul dhan. You got to have husnul dhan for your brother. Husnul dhan is like, your brother said he's going to pay you back in 3 months, and he takes a year to pay you back. Maybe you didn't have it. Okay, that's husnul dhan. There is no husnul dhan for somebody who says fentanyl Floyd. Ain't no husnul dhan for somebody like that. There's no husnul dhan for somebody who says Tyree Nichols, or rather, whatchamacallit, Andrew Tate is guilty of these crimes like white supremacy is guilty of killing Tyree Nichols. Ain't no husnul dhan for that. Husnul dhan where? As a matter of fact, if you have husnul dhan for somebody like that, that's blameworthy. you should be looked at funny. You should be looked at funny. Because you see a wolf showing their teeth, and you bringing your family and your babies around it. Talking about maybe it's a home trained house dog. You're dangerous. There comes a point in time where intelligence has to be priority. Hustle done. Hustle done where? So anybody with a thobe and a beard, anybody can tell you anything. And when they are dead wrong, like dead wrong, okay, you're going to give them hustle done? Keep your hustle done. Keep it, please. We don't need it. Let's keep watching.
Terrifying experience. We were all afraid.
I'd like to bring in former FBI agent Mike.
Let's finish with this now. Let me just bring in. Let me just pop this one up here now. I'm going to put another one on. This is the podcast that they're talking about. Okay. I put the link in the description. Just give me a minute, y'all. Like some people, bro, is like, man, like they made like it's something to be toyed with and played with. You know what I mean? And if you presented Islam properly, believe me, people would love it. They would love it. But imagine having husnul done for the most wicked elements in the Muslim community. But he's our Muslim brother. Give me a break, man. Let's watch this, y'all.
FBI reports about Mickey's work as an informant refer to racial justice demonstrators as anti-government extremists, which is one of the ideologies the FBI classifies as domestic terrorism. During the Trump administration, the FBI and the Justice Department came up with a new catch-all category to define a type of domestic terrorism from Black Americans. They called it Black identity extremism, a new and rising form in the of anti-government extremism.
It's a great question. What is a Black identity extremist? I think we're all trying to figure that out. Nobody
knows what a Black identity extremist is. Nobody knows. Nobody on earth can describe what a Black identity extremist is. And even if you read that article that the FBI wrote, they are talking about a hypothetical situation that doesn't exist. It's like somebody saying Black supremacist. What in the world is a Black supremacist? Somebody please define a Black supremacist. Something that don't exist. But these are terms and jargon that people use in order to either censor or shed Black folk in a bad light so that they can keep this wicked white supremacist system going. Just keep watching, yo.
knows, in part because it doesn't exist.
This is racial justice activist Malkia Devich-Cyril speaking on the radio and television program Democracy Now! During the first year of the Trump administration.
It's a term fabricated by the FBI, constructed, and it has a history. I mean, for a very long time, for many decades in this country, probably centuries, the FBI has criminalized Black dissent.
In 2017, the FBI's Counterterrorism Division released a 12-page intelligence report that claimed Black identity extremists were motivated by police brutality to target law enforcement officers with violence and even murder. The FBI's theory was that racial justice activists have become radicalized following a police officer's fatal shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, which sparked weeks of violent clashes between protesters and police and brought international attention to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Using the same tactical get-up and the same weaponry we've come to expect in urban warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan, police in Ferguson, Missouri once again had to put down and head off violence in the streets.
The 2017 FBI...
Do you know this tactic of militarizing police against Black folk? When did this start? Do y'all know? Who was the first person to start doing this? Do y'all know who it was? Who do you think it is? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Barack Obama? Who knows what the ominous crime control is and the Safe Street Acts of 1971 is? Who knows what it is? The first person to establish this tactic was Richard Nixon, way back in the 60s. Way back. Before Reagan, before Obama, before Clinton. Richard Nixon he created this federal law that increased the power of law enforcement agencies and gave them greater access to what? Military-grade weapons and equipment. The law also gave greater power to the protectors in the criminal justice system, making it easier for them to secure convictions against who? Black folks, Black people. This law had disproportionately affected African Americans as they were the targeted for arrest by police, resulting in a higher incarceration rates. Wasn't Obama, wasn't Bush 1, Bush 2. It was Richard Nixon. And the same tactics. You're talking about a good almost 70 years later being done in 2023. You must be tripping. You must be tripping. How long are we going to play these games for?
FBI report inspired by the events in Ferguson says, quote, Black identity extremist perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated, retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. The FBI's evidence for this theory of rising Black political violence was pretty thin, resting on a series of a half dozen crimes committed by Black Americans over a 3-year period that had...
Did y'all hear that? We're going to go back a bit, okay? Because I want y'all to hear this. Look at here.
Retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement. Black identity extremist perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated, retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence.
Did y'all hear that? Remember we said that it's the same taxes, just different names? Who was the first person to say that Negro rallying is dangerous? Who was it? Somebody put it in the chat, please. These same old, tired tactics. Who was the first person to say it, please? It wasn't, this didn't happen in 2017 with the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover, in a statement to the press on July 14th, 1967, you know what he said? This is 1967, he said this. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We must face the harsh truth that the civil rights movement must be called to account for its failure to condemn the lawlessness that has spread like cancer in our land." He didn't call it lawlessness during the Jim Crow era when white folks, and mind you, he was around during the Jim Crow era, were stringing up black folks with impunity. He didn't call it lawlessness when white folks were stealing black land and violently destroying entire black communities. He didn't call it lawlessness when the Highway Act of 1957 was used and weaponized to raise entire black communities to the ground. What was lawlessness? Black protesters. What was going on in 1967? The riots. That was lawlessness to these people. And they're saying the same thing in 2023. You are supposed to take your oppression pie and be quiet, Negro. Just be quiet. When you start standing up for yourself, we're going to call you lawless. We're going to call you criminals. We're going to call you violent. We're the trusted FBI. People will trust us.
The FBI's evidence for this theory of rising black political violence is thin, resting on a series of a half dozen crimes committed by black Americans over a 3-year period that had no apparent connection with one another and no unifying political ideology.
It talks about black activism against police violence and police racism, even though it says purported police violence, as if it somehow isn't clear that that's a real thing. It was a sign of somebody being a black identity extremist.
This is Michael German, a former FBI undercover agent.
Do y'all hear that? This is what they do. Your criminals are your cops. It's always been like that.
As inside the FBI, agents all the way to the top saw the racial justice protests as another 9/11 waiting to happen.
What did they see the racial justice protests as? Another 9/11 waiting to happen. Throughout the entire planet, black people are facing their 9/11s on a weekly basis from these white supremacists. On a weekly basis. Look what's going on in Congo. Look what's going on in Uganda. What is happening in Libya right now? No country on earth has more black people in prison than the United Snakes of America. They are inflicting 9/11 on us, okay? Not the opposite way around. 9/11 has occurred in Iraq thousands of times over because of these devils. Thousands of times over in Afghanistan and continuing. These people have some damn nerve.
Yeah, another 9/11. In the summer of 2020, as racial justice demonstrations broke out around the country, top officials at the FBI in Washington, D.C. saw the seeds of terrorism. David Bowditch, the FBI's deputy director, the second in command,
sent an internal memo to his top aides that compared these demonstrations to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. When 9/11 occurred, our folks did not quibble about whether there was danger ahead for them, Bowditch wrote. They ran head-on into peril. In the memo, Bowditch described the racial justice demonstrations throughout the country as a national crisis, whose violent protesters were highly organized.
J. Edgar Hoover again. It's like J. Edgar Hoover, you reincarnated in the FBI in 2020. Listen, y'all. Listen what he said.
Bowditch described the racial justice demonstrations throughout the country as a national crisis, whose violent protesters were highly organized.
What did J. Edgar Hoover say in 1968? Or 1967? It's the same stuff. They're not even trying to be slick anymore. Okay. They're doing the same tired tactics. But the problem is, if y'all keep going for it, why would they change? Y'all out here trying to, be close to these good white supremacists. Like, what? What? Y'all ain't making no sense. You are not making any sense whatsoever. J. Edgar Hoover, 1969. The Negro youth and moderates must be made to understand that if they succumb to revolutionary teaching, they will be dead revolutionaries. They will be dead revolutionaries. These people are people of justice? These people? You going to trust these folks? Give me a break. You can trust that anybody who dies on this stuff will be in hell. You can trust that. And they would deserve it. And when they're rotting in hell, I wouldn't even piss in their mouth to quench their thirst. Wicked, wicked, evil people. Absolutely wicked people. And then you have wicked people repeating the talking points of these wicked people, talking about CRT is anti-religious and stuff. They repeat and protect the enemy, the enemies of Allah and our enemies. They are right there as shields. They're shielding them and censoring you. And y'all won't say anything about it? As a matter of fact, some of y'all bones and biscuits coming after us instead of the enemy. Let it be known, there's a new day, okay? We don't do that no more. We are praying that Allah relieve us from the burden of these wicked people. We ask Allah to relieve us from the burden of these wicked people. Ameen. We ask Allah to accept our repentance and our tawbah. Ameen. We know we wronged ourselves. Ya Rab. We know we wronged ourselves because we have been humiliated by these wicked people for centuries. And we return to you, Ya Rab, in humility and repentance. So forgive us. Ameen. Forgive us, Ya Allah. Unite our hearts on your worship and your book and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and those who followed him in righteousness. Ameen. Unite our hearts on that. We see the error in our ways, Ya Rab. That such a despicable, despiseful, wicked people can have their foot on our necks for centuries. And yet they don't believe in you, nor do they respect you. We see the wickedness in them, and we see the failure in us to follow you. So we ask you to forgive us, and we ask you to guide us. Ameen. We ask you to unite us upon that which is correct. Ameen. We ask you to relieve us from this burden. Ameen. Ameen. Everybody say Ameen. Everybody say Ameen. We haven't done anything to these people. And we don't have to do anything to these people. These people will spy on you. These people will dismantle any type of organization you have. They will kill your children. They will separate your families. They will arrest you unjustly. They will impoverish entire countries and nations. The most evil people in recorded human history. Muslims, the Muslims just wait. They can't wait. These Easterners can't wait to twitch and twirl for Zaddy. These folks, they tell you what they doing to you. And instead of standing up for the truth, you standing up for them. And then you wonder why you're in this condition. It's only Allah that will get us out. Only Him. We are so far behind the curve and we ain't seen nothing yet. There is so much more coming. There is an educational crisis that is here right now as we speak. There is a food crisis, which is here right now as we speak. You might not be feeling it yet, but you will. You heard it here first. Black folks, their income is trending towards zero as a community right now as we speak. Black homelessness is at an all-time high right now as we speak. You ain't seen nothing yet. Unless you Negroes get it together, it's about to get a hell of a lot worse. Trying to make allegiances with the enemies of Allah himself. Instead of calling your own people to Allah and calling yourself and your families to Allah. And then when you see your so-called brothers make allegiance, like outright allegiances with your enemies and the enemies of Allah, you out here talking about husnul done and stuff. It's like, what Quran and what Sunnah are y'all reading? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what Quran and what Sunnah are y'all reading? That's what inquiring minds want to know. Husnul done where? Y'all must be tripping. Husnul done with who? Do you know that J. Edgar Hoover, he said, and I'm quoting here, the Negro is rallying to a dangerous unity. That was in 1968. The FBI, the CIA, the US government, and not just them, we're talking about even European governments, all work together to make sure internationally, Negro unity was never achieved. They made sure of that. J. Edgar Hoover said, the Negroes are in a revolutionary state of mind, and if they unite, they could destroy our national unity. They can destroy our national unity and establish police state. Meaning, y'all Negroes were never meant to be part of the nation. They never included you. They never included you. Furthermore, all of these Western countries, these people, they said in their own literature, with their own mouths, and their own books, and their own laws, these Western nations were established for white folks. They weren't shy to say it. And just because they changed the language, it didn't change the reality, did it? So now the question is, what are y'all going to do? Because Negro unity is absolutely not enough. It's not enough. Can you wake up earlier to pray extra 2 rakat? Can you do that? Can you fast on a Monday and a Thursday? Can you do that? Can you treat somebody who looks like you, who has a similar experience to you? Can you treat them with mercy and respect? Can you do that? Is that possible? Because I will tell you like this, the Negro that is on social media and is excessively arguing as a part of the problem, not the solution. The Negro that is on social media that is putting all their personal business out there in order to seek as attention is a part of the problem, not the solution. The Negro that is always in a state of trying to prove their points to other people and they react before they think is not as part of the problem, not the solution. What we need are Negroes who will actually put in the work. Will you read a book? Will you at least do that? Bare minimum. If you cannot sacrifice your social media for reading a book, then we will deserve to be in this condition for another 100 years. If you can't do that. If you cannot sacrifice your comfort on a couch to go run a lap, at least a lap, then we would deserve to be in this condition. If you cannot sacrifice holding your tongue or holding your typing fingers, your texting fingers, in order to keep the peace, if you can't do that, then we would continue to deserve to be in this position. Can you imagine a whole solid almost 80 years of the exact same tactics in 2023 and still we ain't learned nothing from it? We ain't learned nothing from it? It's insane. How do you plan on getting in the favor of Allah by ensuring our defeat with hasty action and habitual inaction and perpetuating ignorance, cutting off relations? Black people love to cut off their relations. They love it. You get into an argument with or disagreement with somebody who looks like you, it's a disagreement, but for you, it's personal because they disagree with you, okay? And because they disagreed with you, you have to block them. If you're black, you know this is the facts, okay? You know what I'm saying is true. You know very well what I'm saying is true. I'm in several groups that are Desi dominated. Those are like the South Asians and stuff. You know those people don't argue? They don't argue with themselves. I'm in several groups, even when the only people, okay, that bring the argumentation gotta be a black person. It gotta be a black person. We can't progress like that, bro. I'm sorry. Making enemies is poverty, not progress. You don't have to go out your way to make enemies. You can sit back, observe, and learn. You can actually do that. It is possible. Try it sometime. Let somebody say something that you disagree with, and then don't react. Just try it. That's a sign of intelligence. What do you call a dog that barks at every single noise it hears? You call it a good dog or a dumb dog? Every noise it hears. You know those dogs? Who loves those dogs? The only people that love those dogs are the owners of those dogs. Nobody else like them. The whole neighborhood, in their hearts, wishing that somebody would poison that dog to shut it up. Somebody knock on the door. Somebody honk a horn. You know, y'all know those type of dogs, right? Some of y'all act like that. Actually, we're black. We gotta be real. And not some. A lot of us act like that. A lot of us act like that. If we practice, like we have to practice, do nothing that is of no use. If it's not bringing any benefit, just don't do it. Practice that. If you're not on social media to make money, you don't need to be on social media. You got business on social media? No, you don't have business? You don't need to be on it. Why are you on it? Especially if you're a woman. Especially if you're a woman. And it's more especially if you're a single woman. Like today on Facebook, I saw Muslim sister posting pictures of herself. She's working at Foot Locker or something. She's pregnant. Okay, she's pregnant. Muslim sister pregnant, posting pictures of herself. You know this sister not married. She's not married. Hijab, everything. Pregnant like crazy. She wasn't married before she got pregnant, and she ain't married now. But what will end up happening is, I promise you, some other treacherous woman, sisters, mind you, Muslim woman, will be congratulating her on her unmarried pregnancy. This is how we're going to get ahead? When the only messaging she needs to be hearing is, why are you posting this? Where is your husband? That's all she needs to be hearing. I saw that today. Like, shame has disappeared. Aren't y'all embarrassed? Your enemies, the reason why they're able to do these tactics is because y'all haven't changed. Y'all haven't changed. And you're not even making an effort to change. So it's easy for them. Why are you waiting for some other Negro to strive to be the engineer? Why can't you be the engineer? Why are you waiting for some other Negro to become the academic? Why can't you be the academic? Why are you waiting for somebody else, passing the book? And then talking about, why don't the white do this? And why don't the white do... Why ain't you doing anything? Why ain't you doing anything? Why are you passing the buck of responsibility? This year's black folk, we can't control ourselves. So our enemy controls us because we can't control ourselves. And unless and until you're able to control yourself, you will always be, controlled. There's a saying, Sun Tzu, I believe he said it. Was it Sun Tzu? No, it's Miyamoto Musashi. Okay, he said, if you do not control your enemy, the enemy will control you. If you do not control your enemy will control you. So you need to put in the reps of self-control and self-discipline. Discipline doesn't come because you'll listen to a motivational lecture. Discipline comes in doing the things that you do not like to do, whether you feel like it or not. You need to put in the work. People, the FBI out here, they're not even sending black folk to infiltrate us anymore. They're sending like some hillbillies, bro. Hillbillies. Some straight up crackers, bro. Like straight up. You see that, dude? That's what they think of you. And he still ended up entrapping Negroes. Can you imagine? Some tattooed skinhead and stuff. They sent in some tatted up skinhead who drive a hearse to BLM to infiltrate BLM. It's that's what they think of you. Like you're not even like a worthy adversary. And why do they think so little of us like that? Is because we are the ones who are responsible for letting them think so little of us like that. And we as Black Muslims, especially Salafis, that window of time of getting it together is so slim. It's so incredibly slim because there's going to be a point of no return whatsoever, right? That if we don't get it together like now, we needed to get it together years ago. We don't get it together now. If we're not willing to stay on code now and put in the work and the reps now, then we would deserve whatever's coming to us. Anyways, Jazakallah khair. I want to thank everybody who joined me tonight. I want to say walaikum salam to everybody. Please like, please subscribe, please share. And excuse me, I'll see you all tomorrow. Subhanallah, I'm going to be hamdik. Ashhadu and wastaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are the Muslim wing of the Black grassroots. Unapologetic, strong, uncompromising voices that have been in the faces of the enemy and those who tap dance for them. The Feachaz is proud to present the archives exclusively on Patreon.